Well, there have been a few political polls out this week. They have Labor and National neck and neck, and ACT and the Greens bumping round. And despite the fact it's a ridiculous thing to say, journalists breathlessly speculating that the Māori party will hold the balance of power. But you know what, folks? Only one poll counts in an election, and that is the one that is taken on election day. But we have a tradition in this country of basically ignoring other alternative parties. And unless you're in Parliament, it's very hard to get taxpayer-funded advertising time. Very hard, as I know from personal experience, to get media time on state debates and other things. But that doesn't mean that we don't have alternative parties and parties that as yet may not have established themselves in the kind of galaxy of political players. One such party, which was founded, I think, back in 2017, is the Opportunities Party, known as TOP. And I, full disclosure, I did a little bit of work for TOP at the 2017 election, and it had massive problems with its founder and funder, Gareth Morgan, and all people could talk about was cats. But he was right about the cats. They're killing the native birds. He was a man ahead of his time. TOP got to 2.6% in the 2017 election. It didn't do so well last time, but it still exists as a political movement, and it has its third leader, I think, in Raf Manji, who joins us on the line now. Raf, good to talk to you, mate. How are you?
Yeah, morning, Sean. I'm good, thank you. I'm just from 3 weeks overseas in Europe, actually, which was an interesting experience from the COVID point of view, but I was there, really dealing with parental issues, putting my dad into a nursing home, that stage of life, which, is tough stuff, especially when you're far away. And I think we saw that through COVID, so many people who couldn't be with elderly parents. It's difficult. But I'm back. I'm a bit jet lagged. If I sound like I'm slurring, it's because I just got off the plane.
All right. Rev, TOP's still there. What now, 5 years on? And like any, new party, it's been through some stuff. Give us a stock take. What are you doing membership-wise? How healthy is the organisation?
Yeah, I mean, you're right about sort of it's been 5 years. I mean, it's a political startup, and like a lot of startups in the private sector, your first 5, even 10 years sometimes are a bit choppy. You're trying to raise money, you're trying to sell your product, you're ironing out wrinkles in your operating systems, and that's kind of where TOP has been. And yes, this will be our third election, third time lucky, hopefully. And I think, it just takes time for new ideas to bed in. So, for example, concepts like universal basic income are starting to become more mainstream. I mean, the UK at the moment, they're talking about it all the time, particularly the Labour Party, but also the Liberal Democrats, the Greens, and even the recent dispersal from the Conservative Chancellor was very much around universal cash grants. So sometimes these things take time. And I think also timing is important. I think, 2017, as you alluded to, it was hard for TOP to get on the airwaves, even though they had something to say. And a lot of the focus was on Gareth rather than the message.
And then Jacinda came along. I'll be honest, we were tracking pretty well to get to 5% 2017.
Yeah.
Jacinda comes along 6 weeks out from the election and just sucks every swinging female vote and all the oxygen out of the room.
Yeah, and then look, I mean, I stood in the 2017 election too in Ireland, and I remember actually the press were for a debate between me and Jerry in Ireland, and it was all going to be about the earthquake rebuild and recovery, and then they cancelled it because they just said that there's no interest. And so that was 2017. 2020 was all about COVID, and nobody had a chance really to do very much, and National had imploded, and that was a one-off. But I think now, obviously, we're going to have 6 years of Labour behind us. The wheels, I think, are coming off that bus a little bit, and there'll be just time to have a different look and look at alternative options. And the fact that it will be a close election, it'll be more like a 2005, 2008 type election where, the major blocks, and remember, there's only 2 votes you've got really. It's Labour and the Greens or National and ACT. We've got 2 blocks, and then where else are you going to go? So I think there is room for some of the other parties, whether it's the Opportunities Party or New Zealand First or whatever, to attract some votes.
All right. Who are you looking for? Who are you hunting down? Who's your natural constituency at TOP?
it's definitely the younger generation. You know, anyone under 40, anyone renting, anyone on lower incomes. I mean, essentially, we're trying to rebalance the system. And as Top talked about in 2017, there's been far too much investment of productive capital into housing, and incomes are stretched, and that's just got worse and worse and worse. So we want to rebalance the system so that people actually have more income in their pockets, and we're taxing property properly so that investment will be redirected into the sector we really want to promote, which is kind of productive business and an innovative economy. So it's kind of rebalancing that system, and I think the time is right for that to happen.
All right, what are indications? Are you reaching people under 40? Or how do you reach them in a very, very frenetic and busy media and social media environment?
Yeah, you have to be. You just it's a bit of a slog. But I mean, we have I wrote an 18-month plan when I came in. We're on target. We're doing research at the moment. We're building the core found party. It is primarily a volunteer organisation. We don't have a lot of funding. You know, we can't compete with the big spend that the major parties in Parliament have. And as you alluded to, they're campaigning already on parliamentary services funds.
It's such. I got to say, look. I looked at 2017, and look, of course, in 2017, you had Morgan's Millions. And you know the way they were assigned and everything was slightly different. But, man, the advantage that incumbent parties have under our current system is just huge, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And look, we just have to be smart, we have to be nimble, and we have to be quite targeted. So, you know, we will run some advertising campaigns, but actually we're doing a lot of outreach. And every week I get approached by people who are just kind of interested in what we're doing. A lot of them are very pro-environment, but they don't really like the Greens anymore. A lot of them are really pro some of the social tax policies. And a lot of them are just kind of disillusioned. I mean, I get so many people from Labour coming across and saying we're so disillusioned in the way they've approached things. And then there's floating voters. I think there's about 20% in that sort of
Well, I look
space.
at that latest poll. It's ridiculous to have, you know, Jessica Mutch-McCartney saying, the Maori Party could hold the balance of power with 2%, but 11% of the people polled are undecided. Ridiculous to even take that as a story angle, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, you could say actually we talk about MMP, and the Prime Minister was in the US talking about how every vote counts under MMP, which of course we know is not true. Now, of course, if they lowered the threshold, we would have a much more vibrant democracy, and you have those voices out in public, people can make decisions, and, you know, Parliament looks boring and stale and a bit old, and the whole system is just, it's not appealing to people. So I think 2023...
Look, hang on. I'm going to haul you up there, Rafe. It's got the amazing Chloe Schwabrick, who deserves to have taxpayer money spent on, you know, documentaries that lionise her. We've got young people, young David Seymour and ACT there. We've got a full representation of Māori by percentage in the population. We've got people from all ethnicities. Don't get down... Parliament, I worked there 30 years ago, Rafe. If you wanted to see boring, staid and stolid, they had a billiards room. And women weren't really talked about or talked to, you know.
I'm talking more about... I'm talking not so much about the representation, but the way Parliament operates. You know, the question time, the sort of the structured debates. It's not really appealing to a lot of people who are really focused on the outcomes that they want to see. So, I mean, that speaks to governance challenges. And look, I mean, I think Chloe is fantastic. I think David's done a great job. And it wouldn't surprise me to see, you know, parties like Greens and ACT and TOP actually starting to come forward, and the traditional parties, as we saw in France with Macron, start to fade away because actually they try to spread themselves too thin, and a lot of their supporters, you know, go looking for something a little bit different, which is, I think, what we're going to provide.
Yeah. I got to be honest, I'll tell you, when I was working for TOP, we commissioned, and I don't know if you've ever seen it, almost a 3D psychometric model about where top voters would come from. And it was fascinating because it kind of put TOP and try and think of it in 3Ds, in between the Greens, ACT and New Zealand First. That was the sweet spot for people who would identify with TOP's policies and methods. And I always thought, that is weird. That is a weird place to be. But under MMP, with a low enough threshold, you should be able to carve out a niche in that spot, shouldn't you?
Yeah, absolutely. And if you think about it, I mean, let's remember, prior to 2020, ACT was only there courtesy of National, and they were polling at like sort of 1%, and then obviously because of the implosion in National, suddenly they've got 10 MPs in Parliament, and the 5% is such a barrier to democratic engagement, and it's really problematic. So I think we need a little bit more action on that front. And you talk about New Zealand first. I mean, I remember coming out and saying, I thought, they'd done a good job around defence, the defence budget and Pacific engagement. And people was like, oh, but what, do you support New Zealand first? And it's like, get off the grass. It's about acknowledging that all parties have got something to bring to the table, and we should be able to discuss that. I remember my first vote in New Zealand, I think the 2002 election, first time I'd come, getting used to the MMP thing. And I think I voted Green and ACT, because I kind of
Well,
thought,
exactly. Okay. And that kind of proves my point, Rafe, as for where you're from. I want to run through a few issues that are current now and are going to be current at election time. And as leader of TOP, I'm interested in your views on them. First off, lowering the voting age to 16, yes or no? Where are you?
I'm supportive of that, mainly because the earlier you get people engaged in politics, the more likely they're to stick around it. And remember, a lot of those people won't end up voting till they're sort of 18 or 19. But no, I think civics, building social cohesion, a strong, vibrant democracy is really critical.
All right. So you would also be supportive then of full criminal liability in all circumstances at the age of 16?
I don't know. I'd have to have a think about that. I think that's a little bit separate to the voting thing.
Okay. All right. Co-governance, do you know what it is? And if you do you support it?
First of all, Labour have made a total hash of this, along with the whole Three Waters, which I'm very happy to talk about at length. Now, coming from Christchurch and Canterbury, we had co-governance, and the co-governance essentially is local iwi, which obviously is Ngāi Tahu, but local runanga, with interests in particular areas, lakes, rivers, or whatever, sitting around a table working out how best to manage the water catchment areas. So that's co-governance. Now, that's how I see co-governance. At Christchurch City Council, we set up a joint committee with the local runanga, and we were chaired by the mayor and the head of the runanga, and we talked through issues. We dealt with issues like papakainga, and it all worked really well. Now, that to me is what co-governance is. I think what Labour have brought forward is a mix of co-government and co-governance, and they've completely confused everyone. They haven't been clear. I don't think they're clear inside caucus about what that actually means. But co-governance is basically people sitting around a board or a committee and trying to make good decisions about managing particular assets. So I don't have an issue with that. No, not at all.
Okay, what about special Māori wards for councils? That might give a Māori voter proportionately more power than a non-Māori voter?
Yeah, I've never been supportive of that. And again, my experience is with Ngāi Tahu in Canterbury. They never pushed for that because we had a committee. We had a committee where all these issues that were specific to local iwi could be raised and could be dealt with. And I just think, I don't know, I don't think it adds actually a lot of value even for Māori. They can have any input they need through other channels.
All right, let's talk specifically about Three Waters. And I've got to say I can remember and I can still remember what was TOP's party policy on water, and I thought it was a rather nuanced and rather elegant solution to the problem. And correct me if I'm wrong, it basically ran any water resource or catchment, the first priority of that catchment is to sustain the environment. So the environment has first call on water. The second was for people, so people could wash, clean and live healthy lives and have water to drink. The third one, this is where I might get confused, then the third call on water resource, anything left over, the suggestion was that Māori as tangata whenua would have some rights there, and then you go down to people who are prepared to pay for water, farmers and the others. Is that still fundamentally the policy, and did I get it right after all these years?
That's probably pretty close to it. I would say that our whole environmental framework is being reviewed at the moment. But what I would say is water is absolutely critical. And I think the Three Waters, when it was first proposed, I was sitting still on council in Christchurch, and I remember the first meeting with DIA, and they came down and they already had the deal worked out in terms of how they wanted to chop it up. And I remember I said to them, okay, what's the problem you're trying to solve here? And they're saying, well, lack of investment into infrastructure. Well, that's a funding issue. Now, the reason that small councils can't deal with these things, they don't have the ratepayer base. So I said, why don't you fund it centrally like you did the ultra-fast broadband through Crown Infrastructure Partners, which incidentally is already investing money into local infrastructure. And again, it's because they didn't actually want to solve that problem. They wanted to create a whole structure. So again, what they did is they went to look, instead of looking at what we call form, which is basically what's the outcome you want, they really looked at the structure and not at the function. And so I think they've created a massive battle for themselves, wasted 4 years when they could have just been funding these projects. Because remember, every single council, and there are far too many councils, no doubt about that, have got 30-year infrastructure plans on the books. They have to do it as part of the long-term plan. So using an analogy, so after the Christchurch earthquakes, they set up SCIRT, which was an infrastructure alliance model, and they gave them all the projects that needed to be done. They got prioritized, the different alliance contractors bid for them. There was some competitive tension, and it was a very successful model. Now, we have all these infrastructure projects. They're sitting on council books already. They just don't have the money to do them. So I think they've just created an overly complex structure to solve actually what is a reasonably straightforward problem. And I think over time, councils, because certainly again in Christchurch, with Greater Christchurch, with Canterbury, councils will come together and there'll be probably maybe 3 or 4 water service delivery companies who do the work. But I would say central government funding directly, set up a Ministry of Water work you want and build some, capability there. But what they've gone for is just, is the worst option, I think.
All right. Raf, I know a criticism often levelled at TOP and indeed all minor parties is a vote for TOP is a wasted vote. It is such a trope, such an often trotted out narrative by major parties. I know in my time at TOP I found it frustrating. Why isn't a vote for TOP at the next election going to be a wasted vote, or is it?
No, I don't think. I think we'll get 5%, but I think it's not a wasted vote. Democracy is about the opportunity to express your view about the way your country is governed. And so, for people who don't vote or for people who spoil their ballots, they're expressing that view. And I think we need to probably get back to that rather than the constant sort of toing and froing about strategic voting. Vote for the party that you think has great policies and just be done with that. It's not a way important. And it's a reflection of your interest and your civic engagement.
How many members you got at the moment?
Good question. I think over 1,000.
Okay.
From memory. We're a very small party, and actually, our funds come in from our small members. I don't think we've had any donations over about $1,000. So, we have a good membership, and we encourage people to join because that helps us in terms of the funding we get from the electoral officials, but it also just shows a bit of a commitment to people. So we are offering a space for people who really are a bit tired of the old 1-2, the old Labour National, triangulation in the centre, and trying to sort of capture the vote, and want to be part of something that's a bit different.
Okay, and other last question: what should New Zealand be called? Should we officially change our name to Aotearoa or not?
I don't look. If you want to call it Aotearoa, fine. It is New Zealand. I want to call it officially Aotearoa New Zealand, fine. I'm not losing a lot of sleep over that.
Good.
What I lose sleep about, Sean, is people getting food on the table and living in a decent warm house. That's what gets me excited.
Hey, I thank you for battling the jet lag and coming on this morning. I would like to talk to you over the course of this because I do think small parties are an important part of a functional democracy, and MMP. Gosh, if we lowered that threshold a little bit, I think we would have a more diverse and a more responsive House of Representatives. I wish you luck, Raf. Get some sleep, and thank you very much for your time this morning.
Yep. Cheers, Sean. Talk
Cheers.
soon. See you.
That's Raf Manji. He is the leader of the TOP party. Yeah, it's still there.